Greetings. My name is Lauren, and I enjoy friendships all over the world. I bring to you my friend, Dr. Jabor, to read to you passages from his book, Unshackled and Growing. In addition, a PDF version of the book in English is available to you for free on the website friendshippathways.com. While some episodes are short, this one is especially long, but still under 20 minutes. There is important continuity in the words being read that I did not want you to miss. I present to you the episode, The Story of the Father.
Jesus often was surrounded by crowds, including the rejects of society, tax collectors, prostitutes, and sinners. Jewish tax collectors were perceived as traitors because they collected money from the Jews for the Roman occupiers. Furthermore, they made a great deal of money in the process and abused their own people. They were especially hated by those who were in the religious establishment. For some reason, these rejects were drawn to Jesus in spite of his perfect purity and sinlessness. Similarly, prostitutes and sinners who did not have time or the desire to observe the letter of the law were also looked down on by the religious establishment. Yet they too were drawn to Jesus. The Bible says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" This is Luke chapter 15. Another group within the crowd were the Pharisees. Their significance came from the fact that they possessed great power. They were religious legalists who tried to follow the law, the Sharia, to the letter and impose their understanding of righteousness on everyone else. They hated Jesus for many reasons, including the way he treated the lost, ad-dallin, giving them honor and dignity. The Pharisees wanted him to treat these people with contempt. Instead, he welcomed repentant sinners and called the religious leaders hypocrites. With this mixed audience before him, Jesus told 3 stories recorded in Luke 15. I will focus on this third story, which is actually a story about God. Here's a short verse from the Bible. There was a man who had 2 sons. There are 7 words in this verse, yet it sets the stage. The father in this story is Jesus. The elder son represents the Pharisees and religious people. The younger son in the story represents the rejects in the society at the time of Christ. Jesus continued as recorded in the Bible. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. As an Arab who grew up in the Middle East, 3 things surprised me about this request. First, how could a son approach his father and ask for his share of the inheritance while the father was still alive? This is shameful. In those days, people did not keep their money in the bank. The money was mostly in land, property, and livestock. For the father to give the son his share of the inheritance, he had to sell, and probably at a devalued price. As the news spread in the town, can you imagine the sense of indignation people must have felt toward this ungrateful, greedy, disrespectful, and shameful son? The second thing that surprises me is the silence of the older brother. He should have tried to persuade his younger brother to come to his senses and ask the forgiveness of their father. The older brother should have pleaded with his father to forgive this foolish, ungrateful son and to be patient with him. He should have been a peacemaker. Instead, he was silent. His silence is very loud in that culture. The third and most surprising thing is that the father actually divided his property between them and gave the younger son his inheritance. The father's tolerance and patience were amazing. Jesus continued, as recorded in the Bible, by saying, "Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living." We do not know exactly how the wealth was spent, but his older brother assumed that he spent the money on prostitutes. At any rate, it would not take long for a young man in the city to waste away his cash. Then Jesus continued, as recorded in the Bible. After he had spent everything, there was severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. The son became totally bankrupt. He had no money, no friends, no family, and no honor, and he was forced to work for a defiled Gentile as a shepherd of pigs. Can you imagine a Jew who does not eat pork, haram food, having to become a shepherd of pigs and feed them? Even worse, he longed to eat what the pigs ate, but his stomach cannot digest that kind of food. His shame and emptiness must have been horrible. Then Jesus continued, as we see in the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father." When people come to the end of themselves and see the futility of their own efforts, they begin to hear the voice of God through their consciences. This younger son remembered his father and had, to some extent, a correct understanding of his character. He could count on his mercy. At least his father treated his servants and hired men better than the younger man was being treated. When he decided to go back home, he knew it would not be easy. Deep in his heart, he believed that his father would be fair but also merciful. He knew that his older brother would be angry and not merciful. He knew how people would treat him because of the great shame he brought to his extended family and the whole town. In spite of all these obstacles, he decided to go back home. Jesus continued, as we see in the Bible. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. It seems that the father was watching for this son, knowing that sooner or later this lost son would come back. Even if he was broken and unworthy, the father was ready to forgive him and accept him back. When he saw his son from a distance, the father knew what kind of reception the son would receive from the town bullies. So the father ran to his son. How can a man run when he's wearing a long robe down to his ankles? The only way I know of is for this dignified older man to lift up his robe, exposing his underwear as he ran to meet his son. He did this even though nakedness was shameful in his culture, as it continues to be in the Middle East today. The townspeople, who must have been ready to beat up this disrespectful, greedy son, must have snickered at this old man who ran to love and protect his shameful son. What an amazing father! He risked his own reputation to protect his unworthy son. In this story, the father represents Jesus, with the cross as his core value and his lifestyle. Jesus was describing his own attitude toward sinners and to those who knew that they were lost and unworthy. Jesus continued, as we see in the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke. The son said to his father, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." It seems the son had memorized a confession for his father, but the father interrupted him and did not let him finish. Or it could be more likely that the son was so amazed by the sacrifice that his father did in order to protect him from the bullies that he knew that his father is going to forgive him. Then Jesus continued. The father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. What a description of what God is like. God is the righteous judge, who at the same time is merciful and compassionate. He acknowledges us in our shameful condition, just as this father identified his shameful child by saying, "The son of mine." We saw this in Jesus, who accepted those who came to him with humility and a sense of unworthiness. Because the father was willing to forgive this son and treat him with dignity and honor, the people of the town, including the leaders, were willing to do the same. But what about the older brother? Jesus continued in his parable or story by saying, "Meanwhile the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in." We now see the heart of stone this older brother had for his younger brother. What were his motivations? They could have been jealousy and anger toward not only his brother, but also his father. This older brother must have been fed up with a life of legalism, always trying to please his father by observing the letter of the law, but without having a heart for the family. The older son represents the Pharisees and the religious leaders who were angry with Jesus because he welcomed the lost and forgave them. As Jesus talked, he was actually telling his own story about the two types of people standing right there. Jesus continued by saying, "So the father went out and pleaded with the older son." This is another example of the cross as a lifestyle. The older son should have gone up to the house and welcomed his brother and asked the forgiveness of his father. Instead, he insulted his father in front of all the guests by refusing to come into the house. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed the fattened calf for him." Does this sound like a ladder mentality, trying to please God by climbing an impossible ladder, but having no intimacy with Him. This father had actually lost 2 sons. The younger discovered that he was lost and repented. The other did not have a clue that he was equally lost. What a tragedy. Jesus continued by saying, as we see in the Bible, "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The father tried to help this older son humanize instead of demonizing his younger brother. He called him this brother of yours. He wanted to remind him that they were brothers. If the people of the town forgave him and accepted him back, couldn't his own family? Through the words of the Father, Jesus was telling the Pharisees and the religious leaders that the lost are their brothers and sisters. He also showed them why God is so merciful and forgiving to sinners. Is this the end of the story? I believe that if Jesus told the story after the crucifixion and the resurrection, he might have finished it by describing what happened to the father and his 2 sons. Or he might have left it as is and let the hearers figure out the end of the story. The older son, though he had a living relationship with his father, but that relationship did not exist. He was driven by duty rather than love. But the younger son came to the end of himself and sensed his unworthiness. He responded to his father's love and made a life-altering connection with him.